Hi, I'm Anna, the Communications and Outreach Manager at Dyslexia Canada, and today we're joined by Phil Hanley, who's a Canadian comedian. Phil, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hey, my name is Phil Hanley. I am a comedian from Oshawa, Ontario. I now live in New York City. And yeah, I'm happy to talk to Dyslexia Canada.
Perfect. And so my first question for you is, what age were you diagnosed with dyslexia, and how did it feel to get that diagnosis?
I was I was diagnosed at 10, but at like 6, like kind of first day of first grade, I realized something was really wrong. But yeah, there was years of being tested, and my mom was very active in trying to find out what exactly was wrong, and we got the results that diagnosed me as dyslexic at 10. And I felt it was just a huge kind of weight off my shoulders because until then it was just a mystery. They would always say, well, you're smart, but you can't do these things that are kind of expected and for someone my age at that time to do, type thing. So hearing that I was dyslexic, and then of course they didn't know as much about it back then, but just knowing that, kind of identifying the problem, and before then I just kind of took it personally that that I had these problems. Like, I thought it was just me, and then to give it a name, it was a big relief.
Yeah. And did finding out you had dyslexia open up anything for you in terms of like being able to research it or find any like tools and strategies?
Well, I mean, now as far as like researching it, it's kind of been something that I've done actively more as an adult, like once I was out of school.
Mhm.
But in school, although it was a relief, I really, once the bell rang, I kind of, that was the end of, I just didn't really want to think or talk about it, type thing. So my mom became an expert on dyslexia, kind of out of the gates, and would kind of share things with me. But I'm still learning. Like, it's almost like a daily thing where I identify things with being dyslexic.
Hmm.
And it still has the same effect that it did when I was 10. In the last couple of years, I realized that it really affects organization skills and stuff like that. And I was relieved because, like, say I travel a lot. I go to, do stand-up shows, most weekends. And so I got to get ready, I got to pack. And it's always like this huge deal for me. It's like a military operation. I'm like planning and putting things and all this stuff. And I always wondered why it caused me so much anxiety. And it's because, I struggle with organizing stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, because I'm dyslexic myself, and it wasn't until I started working for Dyslexia Canada that a lot of things started to click for me too. I'm actually quite good with organization, but it was just a few other things where I'd never like associated it with dyslexia before.
Yeah.
Until I started learning about it. So yeah, it's definitely still a learning journey, even as an adult.
Yeah, there's so much. And I, even as I learned, and you learn the statistics of how many people have dyslexia, but it wasn't, I was doing, I've been doing research about dyslexia for, different things that I'm working on. And I started reading books written by people that were dyslexic. And when they talk about it, it's like, it blows my mind. I'm like, yes, like that was exactly, I thought of these experiences as so personal and so just me. It would be like, they talk about a specific thing in school or something. And then you read that someone else went through that, and it it blows my mind that other people had these things that I thought were just my experience.
Hmm. Yeah. So a couple of questions from that. So how did you find like navigating school with dyslexia? And was there like any other kids in your school that you knew had dyslexia too, or?
Well, I was, throughout the years, there were times where I was put in classes like, special ed class type situations. And I think there were kids with dyslexic diagnosis, but I feel like it's such a, everyone has it to a different degree. So no, I mean, in school, I'm sure there was other kids that were labeled with learning disabilities, but I didn't necessarily have anyone in school that I was like, oh my goodness, I feel that too, you know, or I deal with that too. So yeah, I was put in special classes, but not specifically for kids with dyslexia. They would also be like, you know, different learning disabilities type thing, kind of a mixed mash of, you know, kids with different learning challenges.
Sure. And so you mentioned before, like your mum was a big support network for you. Were your schools supportive too, or?
Uh, I wouldn't describe them as particularly supportive. There were times where I was given, you know, special privileges as far as like, you know, longer times to write the exam or stuff like that. But certainly when I started, like, you know, up until 7th grade, I got, you know, very little help, or, you know, there were times where we would be tested on the provinces, say in 3rd grade, and I would basically draw what I thought the word Saskatchewan looked like. And it would resemble, you know what I mean? Like if that word committed a crime, they'd be like, yeah, this is the suspect. Like you could tell that's what I was going for, but they wouldn't, the teacher would be like, well, no, it's still spelt wrong. But clearly it's a word with an S and a W and this long on the right province. And so, no, they didn't, I didn't get a ton of accommodations until later on in high school. And when I did get the accommodations, when you know, by the time I was in high school, like I said, my mom was like an expert, and she knew exactly what I needed to succeed. And when I did get those accommodations, then I would be successful. But it's just tough, like day to day. Like I would get, say, for example, in subjects, it took me a long time to write down the notes. I would be given a set of notes, but then you still have to kill the 75 minutes in class where I wasn't doing it. Like I wasn't learning anything because the classmates were reading and then answering questions on what they read. Even if it was oral, I couldn't read the book, you know? So it would be like, I would just like be bored and exhausted sitting through the 75 minutes. And then for me to be successful, then I'd have to go home and spend another, you know, couple hours learning what they learned in school.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely challenging. And you know, apart from those accommodations that you were able to get, like from your school, I guess through your mum, like advocating for you,
Yeah.
do you like pick up any other like tools or strategies that you use throughout school?
No, I mean, basically the tools and the strategies were sitting down with someone who could, you know, help me read and kind of quiz me orally and stuff like that. But as individual, myself strategies that I learned, no, I just, it's just not, when I went to school, it just simply was not set up for someone with my level of dyslexia. It just, you know, wasn't. It might as well have been in another language, you know.
And what about now then as an adult? And obviously, you know, there's lots more access to technology, like assistive technology, and a lot of free assistive technology as well. Do you use any tools to help you now?
I mean, yeah. For example, if I was sending an email and I came across a word that I couldn't spell, when I can't spell a word, most likely I can't even ballpark it so spell check can recognize it, you know? So, yeah, I mean, so then I would Google it, or, you know what I mean? I kind of have little things where I'd go to like dictionary.com and try to like, you know, different sites or whatever seem to have like a better ability to like kind of decipher what I'm trying to say. Sometimes I will use when I'm texting, because that's like a, you know, nightmare when all of a sudden everyone started texting instead of phoning. Sometimes I'll use like the audio record thing, but even that it's not that convenient because for some reason it starts the words with a capital. So it'll be like, yeah, I'll meet you on, and then all of a sudden like there's like out in the middle of a sentence a capitalized letter or whatever. And then even that sometimes doesn't really necessarily recognize what you want, or you'll speak the whole sentence and then you got to go back and you got like this much text and you got to go through it and reread it. And you're like, no, I never said that word. Like, you know what I mean? I said because, not cousin. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So they definitely need to kind of fine tune that. So, I mean, yeah, I do have little techniques, but it's still, inconvenient, texting or emailing or,
Yeah.
once I'm pretty quick to point out, like if I make a new friend or, start dating someone or something like that, I'm pretty quick to point out, oh, I'm dyslexic. And then once I'm comfortable with someone, communicating with them is a lot easier. I hate it's so, to me, as a dyslexic, it's so frustrating and like borderline offensive when I'll like text someone something and they reply, huh? Question mark. I'm just like, no, nothing. It's just delete your contact.
And so just curious, so like it's great that you're, so open, and especially so soon in relationships that you're forming, that you're saying that you're dyslexic. Is anyone, what's like the reaction of that? Do people generally like know what it is, or have you noticed, because obviously you're in the US, is that different from Canada, or?
I mean, I tell people I'm dyslexic. Like I've become so when I was a kid, I thought I was like ashamed and I didn't tell people and stuff like that. Now I will tell someone if I'm sending a letter and it's important, then I will tell the person who works at the post office and get them to proofread it for me. Like I have no qualms. I'll tell anyone I'm dyslexic and ask anyone for help because that's just what I need to do to get through my day. And I have no, I mean, when I'm performing, anyone who follows me or, enjoys my stand-up knows that I'm dyslexic. I talk about it all the time. I mean, some people are annoying and claim like I think I'm a little bit dyslexic. And then their example is like, they have trouble figuring out the percentage on a check or something like that. You're just like, whoa, the struggle. But no, I mean, I still don't think people fully understand dyslexia. And they certainly don't understand what it encompasses. They think that we see words backwards, which I don't. And that's about it. And they just associate it with words. Like if I tried to tell anyone besides someone who, my most sympathetic friend, that I was late because my dyslexia meant that I was like disorganized or had trouble finding the place on Google Maps or whatever, I think they would just think I was making an excuse. It's, people do not understand the scope of it or how it really affects you.
Yeah, there's definitely still a lot of work to do to like eradicate, myths and debunk those misconceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like when you graduated from your school, what was your journey like before becoming a comedian?
Well, I graduated my final year of high school. I was given all the accommodations. I just got like super lucky. And for some reason that year, kind of out of the blue, we were just informed that, there was a program, I believe it was called a aid program or something. There was a name for it. And I basically had a teacher who had been my special ed teacher the year before. I basically had a private teacher 2 periods a day and 275 periods a day. So I was able to do that thing where I kind of went through the motions and sat in my desk quietly for 75 minutes. Then I could take that information and go to this teacher and he would help me. His name was Mr. Armstrong, and he would help me go through everything and learn everything. And I was successful, which was rewarding and made me feel good. And it was great for my mom, who had been my advocate and telling the school that I wasn't dumb for how many ever years that was. It was, it kind of proved it right, but it was still frustrating because you're like, wow, school would have been a breeze, and who knows what I would have done education-wise if I was given the accommodations that I needed. But I was going to qualify to go to university if that was what I wanted to do, and I, sat down with my parents. It was, it was a lot of work and really hard for me to get through the last year, and to have done well. It was, a ton of work, and to the point where I got like mono, and like I kind of worked myself sick. But so we talked with my parents, and they, wanted me to take at least a year off from that and decide, if I really wanted to go to university. And they kind of were a little concerned how difficult that would be and how long it would take me and stuff. So I just, as a fluke, growing up, had a friend that was a successful model, and she, at the time, I was really thin and stuff, and that was kind of the look for male models at the time. So I ended up studying modeling and moving to Europe, and lived there for 4 years, kind of the same amount of time that I would have been in college. And yeah, I got to experience Europe and meet all these friends and, people that I'm still in contact with today that live, different countries and stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then how did, modeling stem into like writing and comedy and
I in modeling, I was so like, I went from swimming with like a t-shirt on to being on a runway in like Milan. Like, I was not by any means felt that I should be there, or like finally my destiny's fulfilled at all. I just kind of look the way, fashion changes of what they want for models anyways. So I just kind of lucked into it, and it was never anything that I, was passionate about or wanted to do. But through modeling, I met all these people, photographers and fashion designers and stylists, and people who you'd meet a photographer and they would talk about when they were 5, they got a camera and it's been their passion. So I was just like, well, what's my passion? What have I been doing since I was 5? And the answer was, I've always, kind of joked around and made my family laugh and my friends laugh and stuff. But it just seemed, it was such a, something that I think it came easily to me, to the point where I didn't even notice I was doing, you know what I mean? I was just like, oh, whatever. And then through modeling, I started doing some commercials and stuff. And through that, a little bit of acting. And then, I took some improv classes. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me like, oh, this making a class of improvisers laugh feels as good as making my friends laugh or my family laugh. And it slowly, I ended up just trying stand up on a whim, and then knowing immediately, oh, this is what I want to do.
So did you like ever see yourself being, a model or comedian when you were younger, or did you have your hopes set on something else?
No, I mean, certainly not a model. And no, I mean, I liked making my friends laugh and stuff like that, but I wasn't, obsessed with comedy or anything like that. No, I really didn't know. I knew growing up, my dad didn't love his job, and I knew that. So I knew, and because the school was, such kind of misery for me, I was like set on doing something that I love doing, and I just hadn't really pinpointed it yet. I was always like doing art and stuff like that. But I wasn't sure exactly what I was wanted to do. I did know that I wanted to travel and stuff. So modeling was an opportunity to do that. And then it did ultimately lead me to comedy.
Yeah, that's really cool. And like, just out of curiosity, when you were thinking about applying to college, or you'd had that lined up, what like course were you looking to do there? Or
I mean, I took in my final year of school, I took an art program, or an art class, and the teacher was like really good, and I could tell, and just from like, by that point I had friends that were in university and stuff like that, and they would see the projects and they would see the work that she was asking us to do. And it was like, it was high school, but I could tell it was kind of like, more than what an average art teacher would put into it or expect to get her students to get out of it.
yeah.
So I was considering going to school for that. I made sculptures and stuff like that, and really loved doing that. So I think I was kind of thinking along the lines of that.
And then you just turned yourself into art instead, and
I try to turn my experiences into that. And but with saying that, and I think this is quite standard for a lot of kids that are dyslexic, like there were a ton of courses that I could have taken. Like I was interested in philosophy, I was interested in all these things, but before podcasting was huge and all that stuff, it was like there was no way to kind of get that. Like books were your option to get that information.
So what have been some of your main career highlights so far?
With like comedy wise, I got to do the Tonight Show, which was a goal, because that's something that I know, my dad watched the Tonight Show, since forever, so that was a goal. And performing when I started comedy. My home club here in New York City is a club called the Comedy Cellar. And when I started stand up, that was the goal, was to, get to perform there. And now I get to, perform there kind of every night or when I'm in the city. And that is like, that was certainly a goal. And it's something that I've been doing it for like 8 or 9 years, kind of every night now. And that still hasn't worn off. I still feel like, really kind of grateful, or haven't taken it for granted yet or anything like that. So that's certainly a highlight. And just, yeah, I mean, it's weird. Like when you're writing jokes, you try to write them as personal as possible. And then but you have to make them relate to people. So say about dyslexic material, not everyone was in special ed in the class or whatever. And so just anytime you can take something that's personal and relate it to people who can, maybe they didn't have dyslexia, but they had some challenge that they can kind of get it. That feels like a highlight. Like anytime you have a new bit that, really connects with people, it always feels great.
Yeah. And so we spoke about how dyslexia impacts you, like, in school, but also on a daily basis of like texting and emailing things. But to kind of put like a positive spin on that, is there any way you think dyslexia has like helped you, empowered your like career and journey or skills?
Oh, 100%. I mean, for one, if I wasn't dyslexic, I wouldn't be doing stand-up, which is a job that I love, that I wake up and write every day. There's no way I would have just I would have just kind of followed the path, which, my friends all did, and they, they're happy and stuff. But yeah, like, I mean, everything that's kind of great in my life that I like cherish, that I feel really tons of gratitude for, is kind of because of dyslexia. Like there's no way I would be a comedian if I wasn't dyslexic. Or, I mean, I have such a great relationship with my mom and such a strong bond with her. I wouldn't have that if I wasn't dyslexic. Like, and then just the way, I mean, I think dyslexic, if you're dyslexic, yes, school is not set up for us. It's, you can get all the accommodations in the world, but sitting in a class and listening or reading or whatever, it's just not our thing. But if you can get past that, then you really get to use your ability. I mean, dyslexics were more creative and all these things, or if not more creative, certainly creative. So, I mean, it helps me in everything that I do, I think. And also as a comedian, there are so many people, you're just standing there telling jokes, and I feel it helps me have a different perspective on kind of any subject that I tackle.
Yeah.
So for me, it's helped me immeasurably in kind of almost every area.
So knowing all that now and embracing that, if you could kind of like turn back time and, tell your younger self something, what would it be?
Sorry, that's such a deep question. I mean, my parents did such a great job of like maintaining my self-esteem, and I think that that's like the number one thing is, if you're not going to have, is kind of maintaining your self-esteem. Well, you're being surrounded by 30 kids that are doing exactly what they're told to do, and you're just like, I don't know. I'm looking and nothing's happening. I'm staring at these words and they're not. So my parents helped me do that. But I would just tell myself, I mean, it's brutal to be like, yeah, just sit tight. But I mean, I think it all kind of paid off. That sitting in the classroom and all the days and years of being that bored, not knowing what was going down, what people were talking about, whether they read, I think it paid off in the sense that when I found something that I was passionate about, I kind of had a ton of energy and a ton of like kind of built up kind of energy to pursue it. So I would just tell myself to kind of not let it affect me as deeply as it did, and try not to get as frustrated, and just accept that school wasn't for me. And it's unfortunate that I was kind of forced to do it for such a long period of time, but it would pay off once it was done.
Yeah, and I think that's really great advice for other people, especially like some watchers, you know, that have dyslexia that are viewing this video and, you know, maybe in high school right now that are struggling, you know, that there is hope and, you know, like you will figure out what your passion is and run with it.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, I mean, it will. I mean, more and more being dyslexic is considered an asset in a lot of fields because you just see things differently. And they've done, this is certainly not my forte is explaining it, the science behind it, but from, yeah, our brains, we think differently. And that's, you know, that's who wants to think like everyone else. That's a great thing. It's just so unfortunate, and I hope schools changed a little bit, but yeah, you got to go through the schooling thing, and it's just simply not set up for us. But once you're out of that, it's like you know, you can just flourish.
For sure. And I know what you're talking about with the like dyslexia being like an asset, especially in like many careers. There is in the UK, it's like a spy network type thing or like cyber spy. I can't remember the name of the like department or company now because it's an acronym.
Mhm.
But they actively seek to hire dyslexics because they just
Oh,
look at
really?
problems in like just a completely unique way.
Yeah, and it's not even, it's just school that's not set up for us. It's not even like, I mean, I couldn't read and write in school, and now I write every day. And it's just that I have the freedom of, instead of being penalized because I don't spell Saskatchewan right, if I have a joke about Saskatchewan, I'm gonna misspell it, and it doesn't matter because it's just for me. So it's not even like get out of school and never read again and never write again. It's like, just like, for example, as soon as I left school, I found books. I can read a book, but it has to be something that I'm really into and really engaged in. And so I can read. I just, whatever they gave me. Like I remember they made us read like Shakespeare and stuff like that, like Romeo and Juliet. And I'm like, this isn't even English. Like I can't, excuse me, read English, yet alone whatever that is. Like it was just wild. I would have no idea who was even talking or what they were talking or whatever. So it's not even limited to the things like you would think, like get out of school and then do a job where you don't have to read, or you don't have to write. I write, that's what I do, you know, or I read all the time, but it's just things that that are really engaging.
And I was like nodding away as you were as you were you know, saying about like Shakespeare and that then because it's definitely very relatable.
Yeah.
Even now, like some books I start to read, I'm like, nope.
I,
Next
I,
book.
I'm the same way. I can read certain writers write like very flowery or aren't direct, and I'm just, I can't, like it's just, so yeah, there's a certain style of writing. And like for example, like Ernest Hemingway writes very like direct short sentences that I can read, you know. So some of the best writers you can still read and enjoy, but you just have to be you know, you're just a little picky, which is great. But again, in school, you can't be
Yeah.
picky, you know, with what you read. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any limits to what a dyslexic can do, but you kind of just, you really set your own kind of pace and do your own thing. And as soon as you're done school, you'll have that freedom, you know.
Yeah.
And hopefully in some schools you have that freedom too. I certainly didn't have that, but I hope some schools recognize, you know, that it's not, you're not, dyslexia isn't a hindrance at all.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's just a different way of learning.
It's just it's just a different way of learning. Yeah.
So, why have you decided to become a Dyslexia Canada ambassador?
Uh, I mean, I felt like when I was asked, you guys, like, were like, before you could even sell me the idea, I was just completely honored, and I like to think that I'll have the opportunity to have the conversation that we've had directly with kids, and I just know how frustrating it was to be dyslexic and to not really know anyone else that was dyslexic. You asked me about my classmates. Even my classmates, it wasn't like, oh man, you can't spell appreciate too. Like, no, they had their own set. They kind of just put kids that had trouble learning in the same class, but it didn't mean that we had trouble learning in the same way at all. You know, I think it's a really individual thing. So yeah, I would just like the opportunity to encourage people who are going through what I went through or what I continue to go through, and yeah, give them encouragement, and just promise them that once they get out of school, it'll be so much different and so much better. And there will be a point where dyslexia is an advantage to not being dyslexic, because you just think differently, you know.
100%, and we're very excited to have you on board, and you know, to work on a lot of projects in the future. And my final question for you today is, like, what are your plans for the future? Like, aside from being a Dyslexia Canada ambassador, do you have anything exciting lined up?
Yeah, I'm in the process. I'm hopefully putting out a comedy special in the next. I'll record it in a few months, and then it's got to be edited and you know, all the stuff. But yeah, so hopefully that's in the near future. And a big chunk of the special, I talk about being dyslexic. And yeah, I have a couple other projects. Some are in the stages that are too early to kind of say, but yeah, I have lots of stuff that I have to wake up and do every day. So yeah, but I'm so excited to work with you guys, and honored to do something that's, you know, because I live in the States, and because of, you know, the recent global situation, I haven't been home. So I'm so excited to work with you guys, be in Canada more the next, you know, couple years, and definitely talk to kids or adults or whoever has dyslexia and feeling frustrated about it, or you know, that needs some encouragement, or just to like talk about, yeah, Wednesday is a brutal word to spell, you know, like I you know, it just feels good to know that other people have that problem, and to connect with people about that.
And where can people find you on, like, social media, or like, do you have a website so they can follow you?
Yeah, I do have a website, philhanley.com. So like my name and then my last name, HANLEY.com. And then the place where I post the most, Twitter is not great for dyslexics, because I would think of like this amazing joke and I would post it, or what I thought was amazing. I could be wrong. Often jokes, you think, oh, this is just incredible, and then you tell people and they don't understand or whatever. That happens all the time. But I would think, oh, this is a great thing, and I'd post it on Twitter. And if you spelt, like, you meant to say were and you said weren't, then like, no, everyone's like, ah, like, you know, it just, no one cares. So I post most frequently on Instagram, and my handle on Instagram is Phil M Hanley, and I try to post, you know, as much as I can there.
Perfect. And we follow you on Instagram as well, and we
Oh,
love,
do you? Oh, good.
yeah, we love watching those videos, especially the ones about dyslexia. We look out for those.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I got some about special ed too.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your personal experience, and we look forward to working with you more in the future.
Yeah, I can't wait. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for asking me those questions. I feel like my answers are sometimes not concise, but it's like I have so much to say. It's rare that you get to talk about being dyslexic, and it's something that kind of affects me all the time. So yeah, anytime you want to talk about it, I'm here.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there'll be plenty more opportunities. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, if everyone keeps an eye on our social media as well as yours, I'm sure more stuff will pop up.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Thank you for chatting with me.